Okay, so I'm watching an old Joe Rogan clip, and he's got I think his name is Peter Joseph, the I guess the founder and the he created the Zeitgeist movies, which subsequently created the movement, and he's sort of one of these you know visionaries in and around how we can rethink society. Anyway, it got me to thinking about society and the way things are made right now, what they're predicated on. So, business, right? Business is I like business. I'm not really anti-business. Uh, I guess on the face of it, I'm not anti-business, but I think when you dig a little deeper into the mechanics of the thing, I think it can get uh, very muddy very quickly. And what I mean by that is business onto itself, at its sort of at bare bones, is motivated by growth. And I mean, I've talked about this before. Growth is one of those ideas. It's one of those ideas. I mean, I was indoctrinated. Like we've all been indoctrinated under the capitalist regime, right? And I'm not. Again, I'm not really, and I'm quite well um attuned to it. Like like I get it. But I remember taking business, and that is business 101, right? Growth. A business grows or it dies, right? You live, you eat, you breathe, growth, right? Growth at all ends. Growth. You know, it's everything for a business. And I mean, I guess the root of that is this idea of bottom lines, right? Making revenue, particularly making revenue for your stakeholders. It was so funny. I was watching, oh my God, it's this HBO comedy. Oh, I can't think of the name of the show right now, but it's this group, these, it's all about sort of, the startup community. And um, I don't even, I think this might have been was it season three, when the main character, the actor, by the way, is it Stephen Middleditch? Is that his name? He's Canadian, by the way. Pretty funny. And I really enjoy the show. But anyway, so his character, the main character, um, I mean, it's such a great show because you really do learn about some of the ridiculousness that happens in startup life, like the startup world. And and I mean, I've been sort of one foot in that water and one foot outside of it, I guess, just because, trying to sort of navigate what the hell I'm doing with my projects and stuff. But anyway, so it's a really funny show to watch. And so in this particular season, well, with this particular episode, he gets sort of um, he gets maneuvered out of his role because he's the founder of the company. But there is this weird sort of in corporate, um, I guess in corporate architecture, uh, the founders aren't necessarily like if the company um, actually ends up getting investment and gets properly backed with venture capitalists or something. That there's a lot of restructuring that goes on, and what you'll find often. Oh, I don't know how often this happens, but it does happen, and it can happen, and I think for good reason. Venture capitalists and their partners, they'll organize the company in such a way that the founder of the company isn't doesn't necessarily end up being the CEO, because that role can sometimes require a lot more experience than a founder necessarily has. Anyways, and so in this episode, he ends up losing, I guess in a way, losing his job, but he ends up working for his company under the CEO as the chief technical officer, I believe. Anyways, it's a technical company, so it's fine. But it's just the irony of the thing. But anyways, at one point in time, he's talking to the CEO, and the CEO says to him, he says, um, so at this point, the main character is complaining to the CEO, saying, gosh, like, I want to do all this stuff, and you're really acting like an obstacle for me. I need you to be on my side, blah blah blah. And the CEO, says to him, um, your product, he basically says, what do you think the product is here, right? He's like, you think it's what? You think it's your intellectual property? It's like, it's not your intellectual property. It's not you. You're not the product. The product is the like the basically the stock price, the stuff that the shareholders end up purchasing, right? That's what you need to make attractive, because that's what's being sold, and that's what's being um, marketed. Uh, and I mean, that was such a really terrible thing to say, but in a way, that just speaks to business, right? The bottom lines of business. What are the operating principles of business, right? Growth is one of them. Bottom line is another. Stakeholders, and making sure that there's and understanding the priority therein being your fiduciary responsibility to your stakeholders. Um, and This is all about making sure that the entity that is the corporation is sustainable, right? And so thinking about this idea of the importance of the bottom line, and making sure that your company's growing and there's revenue. Um, it's funny. There's a lot of in the climate today, a lot of this tension around globalization, globalization, and sort of the harm of globalization and stuff. Um, and I think, like anything else, politics is a lot about marketing, and that's one of those hot button subjects where people really tense up. Like there's always just they tense up around globalization, and losing jobs overseas, and um, and understandably so, because that puts a lot of strain on particularly on the middle class here, right? You can go from the middle class to the lower class instantly by losing all of the manufacturing jobs. I mean, that's basically what's happened to a lot of people. But with the advent and the sort of the exponential growth of technology, I just think the job market is changing, and just changing as rapidly as technology. Maybe not as rapidly as technology. I think technology is outpacing our ability to keep up with it, to be honest. I think technology is way beyond us, and we're struggling just to keep up with the rate of change that is technology. But at the end of the day, I think the job market is just like, even if you brought manufacturing back, manufacturing is still going to be largely, I think, in my mind, an automated kind of existence, where we have machinery doing things, and programmatic software running things. And I mean, even in the service industries, I mean, you look at media. Media is so digital now; it's insane. Um, I mean, for most people, that doesn't mean anything. But if you're, if you understand media, you know what I'm saying is true. It's so digital. Um, I mean, to be honest, it is digital. There is nothing else now. It is simply a digital architecture. Uh, but with you know, there's a lot of sort of hoping and praying and crossing fingers that there's some way to magically wave this wand, and all of these jobs are going to come back from overseas. And I just don't think that that's. I don't think that's how. Like, to me, technology is changing the game in totality, right? And we've got to figure out how to respond to that. And I think in real terms, I mean, um, and I mean, I'll get into that at another time, but but I mean, it has a lot to do with this whole idea behind the Zeitgeist movement. I think, I mean, at the very least, I think it's worth uh, exploring, you know, exploring. But just coming back to this idea of business and bottom lines, uh, if you think about how a business operates, just fundamentally, the health of a business and these core sort of key principles, globalization is an inevitability of those key principles. If you're being honest, because the way that inside of a marketplace, um, see, it's this tension between sort of democracy and human rights, and then the kind of criteria that allows a business to thrive, right? Like you hear a lot of people talking about that businesses create jobs. Yeah, businesses create jobs very reluctantly. That's not something businesses just kind of want to do. That's a really that's a you hum and you haw and you debate. You're not like, yeah, what I need to do is just gush out money to people. That no, businesses don't work like that. They don't want to hire people. They have to, particularly if they're doing well, but they have to do it. And if they can hire people on the cheap, all the better, right? And by virtue of that reality alone, globalization is an inevitability, because within a society that thinks about things like human rights and quality of life and wanting people to you know have a livable income, uh, those principles alone uh, will they operate to raise salary, or at least wages, and so if a business has the opportunity to outsource into markets where those kinds of considerations aren't on the docket, they're saving like untold amounts of money, right? Um, so that by virtue of that alone, globalization, just based on pure capitalist principles, globalization is an inevitability. I'm not even getting into the technology bit, which that's a whole other argument for how all of this stuff works together, and sort of to my mind, it changes the landscape of what we think of as the workforce, the workforce, or another way to put it, the marketplace. But in particularly, when we think of the workforce, like I think all of us sort of grew up in a weird way, kind of watching the Flintstones. And you see that, with Fred Flintstone in his lunch bucket, and he's going out to the quarry, and that's where he works. And, and in a way, I think that's where our minds are still stuck. We're still stuck with the Flintstones and Fred and working over at the quarry and punching in and punching out. And that has long since been done away with, right? I mean, I mean, seriously, if you sit and you really assess the way people are communicating and talking, and it's a different world. It's a completely this is a completely different proposition today. I mean, and I tend to think of it as a really great opportunity to fix some of the problems that I think are still sort of, you know, um, posing a threat to us, as a society, as we move forward and all of these things. And but again, I don't really want to get into the thick of it, but I just wanted to point out the fact that this idea around how business operates, um, and all of the principles that you're taught, it's around growth and revenue and the importance of these things. And these things are in fact important. I'm not saying that they're not, but I think that if you really take an honest look at things, there's something very, it's just inevitable about the way things seem to have come about in a way. Inevitable, but I don't think that inevitability is necessarily the end of all happiness. Like we're never going to right the ship again. I don't believe that, but I believe that the way that we right the ship is we really got to think differently. We've got to accept the truth of the thing. Like we can't really roll the clock backwards. I mean, at least I don't think we can. I mean, if there's somebody who thinks that there's a plan out there where we do roll the clock, we're able to roll the clock backwards and it works for people, maybe we should take a look at that. But I have a real gut feeling that that's not the thing. That's not going to be the way forward, is my feeling. But I think that these whether it's the Venus Project or the Zeitgeist movement, or any of these other sort of conversations and modeling and debates happening around, you know, the cities and the societies of tomorrow. I think that these things are and they're worth doing without necessarily all of the some of the peripheral conversation that's sort of um, mm, it makes it seem more less serious. Like you can't take it as seriously. But I think that uh, just because of the conspiracy stuff. And I'm not saying these conspiracies aren't real. I'm just saying that the way it's talked about sometimes takes us off on a tangent. And so I really like some of the. I mean, I've seen the documentaries, the Zeitgeist stuff, and I really like. I mean, the investigation. It's the material is taken. It's done with a sense of, yeah, I guess seriousness, but it feels um it has this thread of genuine. It feels genuine, you know. And anyway, so the stuff that's sort of taken off since then over the last, I don't know, 5 years, I guess it's been 4 or 5 years now. And I think fantastic. And I hope that to me, that stuff to me seems to be the right way to go. I mean, I don't know who has the ultimate answer. I don't know if it really works quite like that, but um I think those are the types of conversations that we should be having. I'm not, and again, I mean, there are organizations uh all over the world, I think, doing some interesting things, but this just happens to be one of them, I think. And I think it's responding to, and at least attempting to um, delve into some of the mysteries that we live with. And I don't know if they're mysteries. Maybe they're just, it's that idea of you go through life and you don't really realize just how manufactured our consent really has been, you know? And this type of documentary and some of the stuff that I've explored in the last year has really helped to illustrate what that concept even means, manufacturing consent. But in any case, yes, business is based, like, at the core of it. It's a very understandable model. Um, but if you're somebody who's a diehard capitalist and you genuinely understand business, then you've got to see how these things don't necessarily like to some degree, these are irreconcilable ideas. This idea of maintaining or holding on to you know um, the Fred Flintstone model while being a competitive modern day society. It just, no, that's not feasible, right? So you've got to figure out how we're going to stay healthy, viable, thriving society, and how we define what those things are, while learning how to operate at a global level in a way that doesn't, tear apart other countries and nations and peoples. you know, that'd be nice. That'd be a good place to start. But anyways, very cool conversation. I'm going to keep listening to it.